This video is a quick overview of the demonstration solution that we put together for the envirocall meeting that we had a while back. I'll try and keep this reasonably brief, but at the same time I'll try and give you an overview of all the various pieces that we put together for that meeting. This screen is a dashboard screen, so the system is entirely built around these live dashboards. The idea is that each line manager right the way up through to the MD of the business would have their own personal dashboard. The idea with the dashboards is that they show you, if you're an operational manager, they show you things that you're supposed to be doing, and if you're running the business, they show you whether everybody in the business is doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. So we'll see these change colour as we go through. So a referred visit, you could call this whatever you like, but a referred visit, that means a job that's finished. Somebody needs to check the costs and make sure that they're all okay before we put it through to invoicing, and then awaiting invoicing is jobs that are ready to finalise and send off out. The rest are self-explanatory. You build these however you want. This is just an example. So jobs that have got post-inspection waiting or whatever. The idea is that you build the boards to try and identify things that either have gone wrong or look like they might go wrong. So you might have a widget that says the status of a job is not completed, there's only 3 days left until the target date, and the last milestone that you've completed is only milestone 3, in which case go red, someone needs to take action. So that's the idea. What we will do is quickly add an order. In fact, we'll assume that you've got somebody phoning up and that you don't know who they are. Obviously, if you did a lot of reactive work for a particular client, we could load their data, but let's assume we don't know who they are. Sorry, I accidentally nudged the tablet. So let's start off with contract. So the idea is that you'd add the customer and identify which contract within your business that it applied to. So let's do myself. Jeffries. Oops, not an address. Oh, that's not our address either. 2862S. Okie cokes. Capitalised, doesn't matter. Okay, so let's leave that. Okay, so then we're going to capture the basic details of the job. This is going to be test job for video. I've just made these up, but priorities would be priorities specific to the client. So this is just one of these things that would need a bit of configuration. The primary order number, this is probably the order number that you've received from the client, so you're probably putting in the job number. Let's just put demo 10th November 1718. I know that's unique. So save that order. So it's just basically defaults on some information over on the right here. The purpose of this is so that we can report and analyze. You can work job code, SOR code based. You can work time and material, or you can work quote based. So in this case, let's assume that there's an SOR code to go out and do an asbestos survey that's been passed down to you. And then we're going to allocate teams out. So we've got some jobs here that we haven't reviewed yet. This is just a summary of all of our jobs with what status they're at so that we can keep track of them. So this is work that we've scheduled. These are jobs that are not reviewed yet. So we've got our new job here, test job for video. We've got an hour allocated to it, and to allocate this we could just come along here and pick the team. Let's allocate it to one of our teams here rather than individual. So I'm just going to allocate that to this envirocall team 5. and say go. It says I don't work on Saturdays, but proves not to be true. So that job's now allocated out. I should have actually released it because I'm going to put it on my phone straight away. But you could queue out, so you could allocate the work out for a week here. You can do 7 days, 10 days. So you could allocate the work out for a week in advance, and then each day the system would just come along and allocate the next day's work out to the phone or tablet. Or you can choose to manually release the work, or you could set it for 2 or 3 days or 1 day, really anything you want to do. So you can use this really, really easy, drag and drop the jobs onto the teams, gives you visibility and makes it extremely easy to find out when you've got work scheduled. So that's all we need to do there. So if we now go and have a look at the operative on the phone. So if we click on this 22, this is our demo job. Yep, actually this is a job. So the operative, really easy. This just launches Google Maps to navigate them off to the location, probably not needed. I was timesheeted today. I ran a job through just before we started. So the last time I've timesheeted anything was at 4:30. It is now 5:20. So the system forces me to timesheet the whole day. So I'm basically going to come along and say that I started travelling at 4:30. Have I spent 52 minutes travelling? If by the way I'd made a mistake and I hadn't, then you can come along here and correct this. So spent 45 minutes travelling and now I'm on the job. This is the team. This is my team. So this team here is these 3 people. If one of them wasn't here, then I could untick. If somebody else had joined the team, then I could tick who was on the team. But the idea is that it'll remember how I normally work. So all I have to do is just click save. So I'm now on the job with that team. The camera icon up here basically. So we encourage taking of as many photos as possible. All the operative has to do is click on the camera icon, and then click on, touch on take photo. Just take the photo. This is optional, so you can choose to have the operative tag the photo. Obviously your categories here or whatever you define. So this could be a pre-work photo, and if you want you can capture locations as you do that. This just makes it easy to filter them later or to produce a nice report at the end of the job that here are all the pre-work photos, here are all the post-work photos, etc. And you can just take as many photos as you like on that job. So now we're on site working on the job. Thank you. So now we're on site working on the job. On the menu here we've got a couple of options. We could record materials that we've used. If we were doing a post inspect, we could look at photos that have been taken earlier. I'll show you the materials in a moment. The dialogues is where all your forms are. So we would no doubt, evolve these, and you would take ownership of these and change these. But the idea here is these are some of the forms that we had a look at for the demonstration. So you could build these however you want. This is, there's less than a day's worth of work so far in terms of putting this system together. So some of this information might even be known, and we could pre-populate the form. So I don't know what these things are. So standard briefing. Obviously you would type in whatever you want here. Then it goes well when you're doing a demonstration. So this is essentially just trying to take that form and put it onto the device. And then the idea here is that however many employees there are, they're just going to come along. I don't know how we would build this, but I've just built this so that you can just pick somebody. They can sign. I can pick somebody. You give it to each person, and so on and so on. So that's an example of how we might build this. Pre-commencement checklist. You'll get the idea. These are all sort of very similar. The idea is to just try to make it very easy for somebody to fill in. So these are sort of all the questions with the yes/nos on them. Because this is in demonstration mode, I haven't built in any logic here around questions being mandatory, because I mean I have to go down and answer every single question just to do a demonstration, but it's completely up to you how you build this, so these questions could become mandatory. But the idea is you can just come down, add some notes if we want. Checklist completed by Nick. Okay, so that's an example here. I will quickly try and just run through a couple of these just so you get a feel for the sort of thing that's possible. So this is an enclosure inspection. Really, this isn't your paper-based version of this is a form that you essentially tick off every day. The idea here is this is something that will be additive in the database. So we just come along each day and basically say that it's okay, and then that will create a record in the database to say that I inspected it at that time. And so my replacement for one bit of paper that's got a tick on it every day is now looking at a database that's got the time-stamped record of when I came down and did this. We'll have a look at all these later. Not sure what's supposed to go in there, probably my signature. I'm not sure what this is. I think these all get to be very similar. So the idea here is, but you build these however you want. If you can pre-populate stuff, if you want people taking photos of things, making comments, picking from lists of standard options, then really all of these are very easy to do and interchange. I think this is probably enough, but you get the idea. So the idea is extremely easy to take any paper-based form that you've got. It's not technical. This is something you do yourself. Take any paper-based form that you've got and migrate it onto the tablet so that it becomes electronic and something you can do out on site. And obviously you just go in and out and do this as much as you like. If you start recording materials, then that as well is quite easy. You probably just search. So I do not have sensible material lists that you might have on your van, but so it doesn't matter what it is, does it? It's a material code, so very easy just to record materials. This is actually keeping a track of the movements out of my van, so wasn't on the demonstration, but before I got to the demonstration I've logged on to my PDA, I've logged on to the van, so the system is recording that I've taken this item out of my van. So I'm going to end up with a record of all the movements out my van, and then when I pick up material, so I should have an accurate running van stock. So that's that. We would probably take more photos. We would take start of day photos, end of day, show how we left the site, and then at some point you're going to be ready to finish, and you're going to come along and you're going to say you're complete, or you're leaving to come back. I've made comments mandatory. This is optional. So say that I'm coming back, and basically, so here I am again at where I started with my job still on my phone, so that I could come back and complete that job if I wanted to. So if we just have a look at how that has materialized back here. So the job that we're doing here, our test job for video, I think this is the demonstration that I did when I came and visited you. This is the job that we've been busy on here. So if we have a look at this job now, we've started to build up some cost. We've got some materials, we've got some labour costs. So if we looked at the cost tab, we'd see any materials that we've used. 3 people went out on site. So if I have a look at the visits, I've got the record, even though that these 3 people didn't have tablets and didn't record anything, I've got timesheeted records of these 3 people having been on site, and it's these 3 that would have pulled through the costs. I have got, so if we look here, obviously I didn't take lots of photos, I just took the one, but we've, very easy access. So nobody has to come back to the office, nobody has to email, there's no admin work involved here, the photos are just available all the time, and the system collects all the photos from all the people across all the days, and they're all available on one gallery. So there's one record for the total job, and everything gets rolled up onto it. If I have a look at the Documents tab here, so this is a record of the various different things that we've done. So we started out with toolbox talk, everything, and everybody's got all their signatures in there. And then we've had the various other things, the pre-commencement site checklist. So all these documents could be returned onto your network. Again, I have not spent an enormous amount of time on these, so I've really just taken some example forms that we were sent over, had a very quick bash at putting them onto the tablet and turning them into a PDF. These can get emailed around. They can be conditionally emailed, so if there's a problem it can get emailed, but otherwise it can just get saved. This data all gets held in the cloud, so this data will be available 4 or 5 years down the road. You could still come back, look at that job, have all the photos, have all the documents, have all the paperwork. So in terms of auditing, health and safety, compliance, you really are completely eliminating filing cabinets, folders, paper, and going 100% paperless. If I come back to my KPI board, I've now got the job that's come through here. If I click through this is now our job. And what I would then do is I'd check, I'd make sure that I was happy with everything. When I'm happy with it, I'd move this to financially completed. Oops. You can put a note, you can make this not mandatory if you want to. So now it's dropped out of my job costs checked change widget, but it's gone into my waiting invoicing widget. If I drop down here, if I look at the invoice batches, then what the system's done is the system is running a batch for each client. So I've got waits here. It's building up that batch. This job's now gone in here, and it builds this until either, so you can set these batches to automatically close or you can close them manually. You might go for a weekly cadence or daily, or you could do job by job, but the idea is that you triage the costs. You might, when the costs are okay, you move it to financially complete. That puts it into an invoice batch. You could then come along at the batch level. So at this batch level, you could then come along and manage the jobs at this level. So we could come along and close that batch, print a report, send that to the client. Once they're happy with it, move it to, so if I move this to closed, then I could say it's awaiting approval. Once it's approved, I could come back. They could give you a reference that we put in. Then we could say it's been approved. And then invoice generally means, well, you could either just be recording that you have now invoiced this in your finance system, or you could move, I think you said you used Sage. So when we press invoiced here, the system could then send an interface to Sage with all the detail from this batch. And then the invoice would be generated in Sage as normal. But we have other customers where we do exactly that. So that's the process, really. Some of the other bits and bobs very quickly. So we've had a look here at the order management. So this is a list of all the jobs that you're working on, so you can see how much invoice value there is and what the costs are and what your margin is on those jobs. You can get a summary of all of the work for a particular contract. So if I wanted to come down for a particular contract and see how much work I had at each stage, so how much was a work in progress, how much was completed, waiting to get invoiced. You can start to analyse this by, as a demonstration system, so everything's very old, but you can start to analyse jobs by how long ago they were raised and you've still got them, or you can normalise that against their target date. So the idea here is this is all the open jobs you've got for this client. Everything to the right of the middle is late, everything to the left is okay, but the nearer it is to the middle and the closer it is to becoming late. You might get into starting to analyse stock. So these are the vans, this is how much materials they're driving around with. The stock movement summary is telling me this is every part I've got in my system, and this is the most used part. So this straight connector is the most used part. It's been used 6 times in my demonstration system. But you might come along and just say, well, I just want to look at ordered materials, in other words, things that we're using. So you might just be looking at responsive work, repair work that you're doing, or call outs or emergency work, and seeing how much of that you're managing to cover off the van stock or you're having to order for. But either way, this is just a really detailed analysis of everything that's going on with the materials on the system. The van stock movement summary, this is just each van and how much spend has gone through that van month by month. So that can be useful in terms of telling you how, you're looking for patterns really. You're looking whether people have got different usage. Visit management summary. So this is these are all our operatives or engineers. You'd be looking at this, you'd filter in a real life system. So you'd be filtering for a particular team or a particular date range. And this is telling you how many jobs they've done, how much work they've completed, may or may not be useful. We end up with a live diary of what everybody's doing. And you can also start to build PI type reports if you want to, if it's useful. So I don't know how many of these would be relevant for the sort of work that you do, but percentage of your jobs that you're doing on an emergency, average void turnaround time. So and to build these, you basically are just creating these widgets yourself. So you're just coming along and saying this is going to be the average of the work turnaround time. You've got a order turnaround time and a work turnaround time. So this is end to end, and this is from when you start work to when you finish work. But anyway, again, this is non-technical. This is something that, given 15, 20 minutes training, you'd be building these yourselves. Okay, so that's probably gone on too long already. I hope you found that reasonably useful. Obviously, we can cover off more detail if needed.